Welcome to Skytech-Lens. In 2025, the world's longest undefended border, stretching thousands of miles between the United States and Canada, became ground zero for a fierce economic conflict that few saw coming. What began as a policy decision in Washington quickly spiraled into a full-blown trade crisis, with consequences that rippled far beyond North America. A sudden U.S. tariff on Canadian metals shattered decades of partnership and trust, sending shockwaves through industries from Detroit's auto plants to Toronto's bustling factories. The move disrupted supply chains that had been carefully built over generations, leaving manufacturers scrambling to adapt overnight. This wasn't just about steel or aluminum. It was a battle of political wills and economic futures, with prices soaring and thousands of jobs suddenly on the line. Families worried about their livelihoods, and business leaders faced tough choices as uncertainty gripped the market. President Trump, doubling down on protectionism and promising to put America first, faced off against Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, a seasoned central banker turned crisis manager, determined to defend his country's interests on the world stage. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, once hailed as a symbol of regional cooperation, was suddenly thrown into chaos. Businesses scrambled to interpret new rules, while governments on both sides of the border rushed to defend their turf and reassure anxious citizens. The world watched closely as the dispute threatened to unravel years of economic integration. China and other global powers eyed the fallout, ready to seize any opportunity that emerged from the chaos, while international markets braced for further shocks. Would new environmental standards and industrial policy offer a path forward, or would escalating trade wars become the new normal? Activists, policymakers, and industry leaders debated the future of global commerce in a rapidly changing world. For the US, it was a test of economic muscle and national resolve. For Canada, a fight for sovereignty and survival in a world where alliances could shift overnight. The outcome of this standoff would set the tone for global trade in a new era of uncertainty, reshaping relationships, redrawing alliances, and redefining what it means to do business across borders. The crisis erupted suddenly in March 2025, sending shockwaves through both political and economic circles across North America. President Trump announced a sweeping 50% tariff on all Canadian steel and aluminum imports, justifying the move by invoking national security concerns and the need to protect American industries. The official White House narrative insisted that America had become too reliant on foreign metals, even from its closest allies, and that decisive action was necessary to safeguard critical infrastructure and jobs. However, leaked internal memos soon surfaced, revealing that the administration's true concern was China. Officials accused Beijing of using Canada as a backdoor, funneling cheap steel into the US market to evade existing tariffs. As a result, Canada found itself caught in the crossfire of a much larger US-China trade war, with Ottawa blindsided and public outrage erupting across the country. In a controversial twist, Trump also tried to link the tariffs to the ongoing fentanyl crisis, suggesting that Canada was not doing enough to stop the flow of drugs, an assertion widely dismissed by experts and journalists as political theater. Critics on both sides of the border saw the move as blatant economic protectionism, thinly veiled in the language of national security, and warned it could seriously damage relations with a key ally. The administration's gamble was clear: pressure Canada into making concessions. But it underestimated Canadian resolve, setting the stage for a fierce backlash and a new chapter in North American trade tensions. Canada hit back hard. Prime Minister Carney's government imposed a matching 50% tariff on $22 billion of U.S. exports, targeting politically sensitive goods from bourbon to cheese. The message: Canada would not be bullied. Carney's Canada is not for sale declaration rallied the nation and united political rivals. The retaliation was designed to turn U.S. businesses and farmers into lobbyists for peace, hitting swing states and key industries. It was a risky move for Canada's integrated economy, but Carney bet that short-term pain was worth defending sovereignty. The world watched as the ball returned to Washington. The trade war had officially begun. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Almost overnight, the economic landscape on both sides of the border shifted, leaving businesses and workers scrambling to adapt to the new reality. Canadian steel prices soared, squeezing automakers and construction firms, while U.S. companies reliant on Canadian metals faced rising costs and shrinking margins. Projects stalled, and uncertainty rippled through entire industries, from manufacturing to infrastructure. GM warned of billions in losses, The company's future investments and jobs hung in the balance as executives scrambled to reassess their strategies. Ford braced for higher prices and lower demand. Dealers watched as customers hesitated, worried about affordability and the uncertain future of the auto market. Even American craft breweries felt the pinch, with aluminum can costs threatening their survival. Small businesses, already operating on thin margins, now faced tough choices about raising prices or cutting staff. The tariffs backfired, putting thousands of U.S. steel jobs at risk and sparking layoffs. Hopes for a manufacturing revival faded as plants reduced shifts or shut down entirely. Cross-border tourism plummeted and Canadian consumers launched boycotts of U.S. goods. The once busy border towns grew quiet, and local businesses suffered from the sudden drop in visitors. The once seamless economic partnership became a source of shared pain, exposing just how intertwined and vulnerable both economies had become. Supply chains fractured, and trust between trading partners eroded. Everyday life changed, higher prices, lost jobs, and growing resentment. Families struggled to make ends meet, and communities felt the strain as local economies faltered. The Federal Reserve noted a chilling effect on investment and consumer confidence. Businesses delayed expansion, and investors grew wary of the unpredictable climate. The trade war was no longer abstract, it was hitting wallets and livelihoods. The pain was real, and it was being felt in households and boardrooms alike. Both nations realized there would be no easy winners. The economic wounds would take time to heal, and the lessons learned would shape future policies for years to come. Canada refused to just play defense. Carney's government launched the $4.8 billion Green Steel Accord, betting on clean technology to future-proof the metals industry. The plan invests in electric arc furnaces and hydrogen-based steel, slashing carbon emissions and making Canadian metals the greenest in the world. Ottawa used carbon data to challenge U.S. security claims, reframing the debate around sustainability. The strategy aligned with U.S. climate policy, making Canadian green metals vital for American automakers chasing tax credits. The move turned U.S. corporations into unexpected Canadian allies, lobbying for access to clean metals. Canada's gamble win the trade war by leading the green industrial revolution. The crisis became a catalyst for innovation and a new vision for North American industry. The trade war became a political spectacle. Trump doubled down, rallying his base with promises to protect American jobs, while critics in Congress and industry warned of economic disaster. Tesla and SpaceX lobbied fiercely against the tariffs, fearing production delays and higher costs. In Canada, Carney's tough stance won overwhelming public support, with polls showing most Canadians backed retaliation despite the risks. National unity surged, and anti-American sentiment hardened. A tense White House meeting between Trump and Carney ended in deadlock, with both leaders digging in. U.S. officials called the deal very complex, signaling a long, bitter standoff. The political lines were drawn, neither side willing to blink. The world took notice. Allies like Japan and Australia studied Canada's playbook for standing up to U.S. economic pressure. Canada filed a WTO complaint, but with the dispute body paralyzed, legal relief was years away. China seized the moment, rerouting exports and expanding its global market share as the US and Canada fought. The trade war disrupted supply chains worldwide. Tesla's Berlin factory, for example, scrambled to find low-carbon aluminum. The conflict weakened Western alliances and handed China new opportunities. Global companies faced tough choices, higher costs, and uncertain futures. The North American trade war had become a global problem. North America stands at a crossroads. Will the US-Canada trade war spiral into endless protectionism, or spark a smarter, greener era of global commerce? Trump's tariffs exposed the dangers of economic nationalism, threatening alliances and stability. Canada's Green Steel Accord offered a glimpse of a future where trade and climate goals align. The stakes, a fractured world of economic walls, or a new paradigm where countries compete on sustainability, not just price. The outcome depends on whether leaders can look past politics and recognize their shared interests. Can green industry bring the US back to the table? The answer will define the next chapter of global trade: conflict or cooperation, regression or renewal. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel Skytech-Lens for more updates.